This is the October 15th, 2024 meeting of the Town of Southampton Landmarks and Historic Districts Board. Present are members Stephanie Davis, William Hine, Samantha Malone, Larry Jones.
Recording in progress.
Susan Sherry Clark, Tim Ganettis, and Martha Green, and myself, Ed Wisnowski. Barbara Roberts emailed me all day, but his finally getting on an airplane at Niagara Falls. Her flight was canceled because
Recording
of
in
the winds
progress.
and rain yesterday, so she was unable to make it for today's meeting. And Jeff Gibbons reported ill, so he will not be here tonight as well. With that, let me just indicate this meeting is being conducted under town and New York State law to allow in-person and virtual participation by remote participants. They can participate by activating the Zoom link to be found on the town clerk's web page. And the links also are found on the published agenda for the Landmarks Board meeting tonight. Viewing only is activated by clicking on the live link at the top of the town clerk's web page. The online Zoom participation for this meeting tonight is being moderated by Peter of CTV. For any comment, remote or in person, participants should identify themselves and hamlet of residence. To reduce wait times for online and in-person participants, our practice is to advance such items on our agenda so that they may be taken up first. Commentators who have registered will be advanced to the top. The first item of business on the agenda that we have is the approval of minutes of September 17th. Stephanie circulated minutes which had some comments for adjustment from Bill and Susan prior, and they were distributed and corrected this afternoon and distributed. Are there any other comments to be made about the minutes? Hearing none, I'll move their adoption.
Second.
Seconded by Stephanie. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. The first agenda item, we have someone here to who is interested in the application of 8 Justin Lane, North Sea. And we have had Samantha prepare a report for the Landmarks Board.
Yes.
Which a compliment.
Thank you.
First effort.
All right.
I think we were all impressed. Would you like to basically sum up what you found? This is the let me just provide the visual overview from the town.
Sure, thank you. So the property is on a 0.16 acre parcel. It's waterfront on Little Fresh Pond, and it's part of the Gondola Gardens subdivision from 1927. The current structure is 842 square feet. It's a one-story single-family dwelling with an attached shed. So Gondola Garden is a short street that leads to a circular neighborhood. With it's comprised of Alder Lane, Ragnar Lane, Trout Lane, and Justin Avenue. Justin Avenue is the eastern fronting waterfront side of that circle. So this neighborhood in the 1920s and 1930s was developed as, more affordable summer residences, which were sometimes called camps. And it was owned by a Mr. and Mrs. R. Collette and was then eventually sold to C.B. Schwed and his wife. The property stayed in the Schwed's ownership until the 2000s, when Gertrude passed away and left the property to her niece and nephew, the Sabokas. The Sabokas kept it as a summer residence, as their aunt and uncle had, until they sold it in 2021 to the current owner. It's a tucked away little neighborhood that you'd drive right past if you didn't know it was there, on North Sea Road. It's quiet in that circle and has small bungalows. If you drive around, all the houses kind of seem, a little untouched, is how I would describe it, which is nice. You can appreciate Little Fresh Pond. It's got beautiful views, and is interesting. So the current application will not expand the footprint of the house. They are proposing to add a second story. I thought that the application was pretty thorough as far as providing detailed photographs of the renovations that have already been done since the construction in about 1940. It's pretty clear that there have been a good number of renovations. The siding looks like vinyl. The roof looks like it could use some help and is pretty weathered. The interior has, modern tile and appliances in the kitchen. Overall, I found that although it's a tucked away and sweet neighborhood that seems quiet, I don't find that it would reach the criteria as a landmark itself. Although you can see the character of the neighborhood as historic bungalows that would be a nice little summer retreat. So my recommendation would be that the board provide no objection to this application.
I like the pictures that Samantha took it out. There was an angle that you could see the two parts. When I looked at that looked really massive to me as a second story addition. And I think the application mentioned was already a 2-story house, but the town lists 1 story and it appears to be a 1-story house. That looked really massive, but when I saw that one angle of yours, you could you could see more how it would fit in.
Thank you.
Because I know it would have to meet the pyramid and all the different types of things that we don't evaluate it for.
So it will change the neighborhood a little bit, because the neighborhood is also basically a lot of 1-story cottages.
It is a lot of 1-story cottages. I think, Susan, you had worked on an application in 2017 that went through. I believe that ended up as a 2-story property on the other side.
Trout Pond, maybe.
Yeah.
In the beginning. I haven't driven I went with Sheila in whatever year that was. I haven't been through that neighborhood since that time, but they were mostly one story.
Mostly one story.
That one was, I think, larger. That trout pond one was larger, maybe even to start with.
So, is there any concern with Samantha's recommendation for, okay.
I think what you're looking at was 1940 when it was built, or is that with the town?
Yeah.
So once you get into that 1940,
Yeah, one of the things, great view, certainly.
it looks like the inside's already been done though. I mean, it looks fairly modernized.
One of the things associated with it's a little bit unclear with respect to the ownership history of the property. Here you see the original subdivision map from 1926, and the name C.D. Schwed is on the map in 1926. So it might be unlikely that R. Collette, whoever they were, that you have the newspaper clipping selling something to him, would be this parcel. It might be another parcel, but I don't think it was associated with the original parcel. I think only deed research would, probably accurately determine that.
I also found that I was also confused by that because the affidavits that went along with the pre-existing certificate of occupancy, there was a second affidavit from a neighbor. I didn't include in the report, but there were two affidavits. There was Sabotka's affidavit and then the neighbor's affidavit. They both referenced the Colettes who lived there. So that was the reason that, I was curious how they would have gotten the Schwed's name on the old subdivision map, if it's a filed map, but the two affidavits that said that the Colettes lived there in the 1950s seem to back that up.
Those are notes that the assessors put on the old maps.
Okay.
So at one point, it may have been owned by those people, but that's just a snapshot in history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the adjacent owner, it's not very legible, but it's R. Sabotka, who is one of the descendant or related families who, provided an affidavit as well. So they owned a neighboring property as well as the original one. But be the ownership, whatever, the recommendation is still appropriate, I think. So without any further concern, just as a Brent, Ryan, do you have any comments?
I wanted to say thank you for your hard work, and I have nothing to add unless you have any questions.
So I think we're
Excellent.
fine.
Thank you.
What was presented, and it worked very well for getting a report generated. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we have 91 Job's Lane in Bridgehampton. I sent out a report a couple of days ago, and this property is, let's see if I got the report here. This property sits on, let me just get the location of it for you. Sits on Sam's Creek. And just to provide some, close to the shoreline of the beaches at Bridgehampton area. This is Sam's Creek and ultimately feeds into Mecox Bay to its west. The assessor had identified this property as built in 1930, but my evaluation shows that it was built much earlier than that, and based upon newspaper information, I determined it was 1914 and built by a businessman from New Jersey whose business was kind of New York commodity-based business involved in the export and processing of flour. His business, he was a businessman. He was the third generation of that business. The business was founded in 1804 by his grandfather in New York City, or Manhattan, I should have said, but and had obviously prospered enough over the years. He lived in New Jersey, and here you see his name, Philetus Havens Holt. I would also just point out that above his name, you see next store, J.T. Adams, stands for James Truslow Adams, a famous historian who wrote the history of Southampton town east of the canal in 1919 or so. So already the Shinnecock Canal was a dividing line for attention in Southampton town. He also wrote memorials of old Bridgehampton. Not to get off on Adams, but Adams had gone into the business of finance after he graduated from Yale in 1902. By the time 1912 came around, he had enough money to build a mansion in Bridgehampton and spend the rest of his life writing history, both academic and scholarly, both of the United States and for England for a time. He had spent in England and was quite a famous guy. But his neighbor from New Jersey was Philetus Holt. And Adams bought his little parcel of land from the Cooper family, Mortimer Cooper and Thomas Cooper. If I can get rid of this, who you can see, Thomas Cooper's estate is right there. And Mortimer Cooper and H. Cooper would have been Herb Cooper, who was alive in my lifetime as well. That was their farm. They had farmed on that property or on those properties for many years. So in looking at it, a report in the Star Ledger of Newark, May 1914, Councilman James T. Adams and Philetus Holt of Oak Ridge are erecting residences in Bridgehampton. So that's confirms the date for the erection of that house. And a local article in the County Review gives the name of Brady and Halsey, who are active builders in Bridgehampton area, Southampton, Bridgehampton, and surrounding town. Sanford and Sons, famous for plumbing and gas works for the town of Southampton. And Rupel was a famous mason turn of the century from Bridgehampton itself. So the house is proposed for change of windows, among other things. As new stone terrace, a garage, relocation or construction of a new pool house and pool house patio to attach to the swimming pool, just to give you a sense of what's involved. I should also point out that this house here, that's the house, subject house, this is a conservation buffer along Sam's Creek to preserve the water quality of the creek and the bays. This building is overtaken by vegetation. The application shows some of that. The application I thought was very good for presentation of the argument. If I can get the photographs just to give a sense of the here's one of the buildings on the property, the interior. So I don't know how much of the questions are involved. The house has windows without divided lights, and the proposal is, among other things, to replace windows with simulated divided lights. Windows have obviously already been replaced sometime in a previous kind of renovation. My recommendation, looking at all of it, is the house was not identified in AKRF, and I think that was because it was so remote at the end of about 1,000-foot roadway, private roadway, and not familiar to anybody. And given the 1930 date,
Yeah.
I think that came from just looking at the historic aerial of 1930 and not being able to isolate enough information to pinpoint it in association with the earlier real estate maps, 1916 real estate map, and of course 1902 real estate map does not show it. So basically I think the AKRF kind of might have missed the boat a little bit on identifying it as a house of some historic note.
I would just say, I think it's exactly what you said, and also the AYB, because I know the chairperson at the time covered Bridgehampton, left no stone unturned to make sure everything in Bridgehampton would be included, if possible. But between the age and not being able, the lack of visibility, that's all I can think of, because because you can only do so much, oh, you only do so much research based, because there are other ones that you have to move on to, but what you found was really interesting. I didn't know it was there, of course.
Right. So, I don't find any of the proposed changes of real significance in terms of, loss of the general historical character. The house is really only visible to the public from Sam's Creek, which means you might be in a kayak. But I don't think there's any problem with what they are proposing. So, any feeling otherwise, Martha, or anyone? No.
It's a great find.
It's a beautiful
Yeah,
house.
Yeah, it does have very distinctive design. When I evaluated James Truslow Adams' house next door, 2019, I forget the date of it, but from Summit, New Jersey, and he was involved with an architect who designed summer homes for the wealthy, who also happened to live in Summit, and Summit was its own kind of resort community for people escaping New York City, looking for country residences as well at one point. So the house smacks of a practiced architect in terms of its design, but not been able to identify one. I did suggest that given the association of Holt and Adams together, that the Summit-based architect Benjamin V. White might be the prime candidate for it, but it would require more research. No.
What do you call the design of the house? Is there a name? Is it English colonial? Is it this? What's the term you would give it in terms of the design? Or maybe you can't. I don't know.
I'm not sure. It fits one.
Okay.
It fits one stylistic category. Sometimes the reference to this is the Sam's Creek facing side. If I have a photograph of see if I have. I thought I had a photograph of the front, but yes, there you go. Someone to the rescue. Why don't you show it to our board members and
So are they keeping the same windows or are they changing the windows?
they're going to be divided light windows on the house.
Susanna Herman, I'm the agent for the application. They're replacing them, they're not changing any window sizes or anything, they're just popping in new windows that'll be very similar to what's there now.
Well, they're not the original ones. So.
No, I don't believe what's there is original. The house has been updated a little bit, but obviously very little. It's owned by a lovely family with young children, no intention to make any changes to the exterior of the property or the appearance. It's a beautiful house, lovely family. They're tearing down a garage, which I think was built in the 90s, and replacing it with the pool house that is going to look more in character with the property. And the little playhouse shed down by the water, which I think you showed a picture of, that's sort of covered in vines. They would have loved to keep that and use it as a playhouse and storage, but they were required to move it because it's so close to the water, and that area is going to be revegetated at the request of the Conservation Board. So Charlie Martyr has expressed an interest in taking that shed and using it on a different property because it's so charming, but the family would like to have an actual usable shed where they can actually store things on the property. So they're building a new shed in place of it. But
It's good to, I loved the shed, I was going to mention that.
they
but-
really wanted to just keep it.
Yeah.
But I think as soon as you move it, it's going to come apart.
So they're not building it in the same place as the old
No, they have to relocate it 100 feet from the wetlands line. So it'll be moved into a conforming location, upland, near the property line. Yeah.
I'm sure it could be moved. I mean, I'm not saying you have to, but people have moved things older than this.
I'm sure they have, and I talked to them about it, and they would love to just leave it where it is and continue using it exactly as it is, but they really don't want the expense of taking it apart piece by piece and building it back, and not being assured that they're going to have a real usable shed once that's done. And that's the garage. Look, that's the shed we're talking about. Yeah. I mean, it's got good bones, but it's written, all the windows are broken out. It's open to the elements. And of course, it's covered in vegetation, so it's not in great shape.
So, any other questions? And so, with the report, we'll send back to the building department, no concern, no objection.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Response to it, and thank you for the information. And
Oh, thank you for the report. I think the homeowners are going to find it very interesting to learn about the history of the property. And I appreciate it too. As a citizen of Southampton, I enjoy hearing all these stories. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, close that out and return to the top of the agenda, which is just to make note of 92 South Country Road, Remsenburg, in which there was an application for completed renovations to a pool house on a property that was identified as a historic resource. And after initial screening, Stephanie, and was it myself who
Yep.
said that it was not significant enough for further review. 215 Sabonic Road, so we will. This house, I didn't get a chance to visit or do much background on it.
We looked at the one next door, the way I did with Sheila, I think in 2007, a demolition.
2000 and,
Oh, excuse me, it's 207 Sabonic, 2019, thank you.
okay,
I looked down and saw 207, and so it's 207 Sabonic, was a demolition in 2019. It was Colback, so I'm guessing,
I identified this as possibly Colback.
well, I was looking at, I just looked at it briefly because I pulled up the old report and the maps were there. And I drove by, but I just looked at it from the road. But I was looking at that CS Hulse, possibly, to the left. Either that or the Colbacks had a couple. There were two, but
Right, this is, we're talking about the reference to the 1916
yeah,
real estate map.
Yeah.
And it's,
thank you.
there's no property lines, just names associated with houses and the ability to identify placement of houses on a modern, to reconcile it to a modern property map is very difficult.
Seemed to be
Impossible.
McDonald's a little bit to the north, but that's on Barker's Island, and he was the fellow with the golf course, which it could be a lot of people here in this area also worked at the golf course, landscaping, estates. But I did see, I looked at the discards, and one of them at the bottom had it looked very pale, Arthur Tunnel, I think. And he was a local developer. I think you've run across his name too. He bought and sold numerous properties. I mean, several that I've researched. But I didn't look further to see about this one.
Well, I don't know if I'll come up with the right map or not. Well, we'll let it pass. I don't have the right maps there, so. But in any case, yes, it's basically to get rid of a garage and
Out of all the houses that I looked at Sabonic with Sheila and, took pictures of them, made notes on them, this one wasn't one of them, and I'm not sure with that AYB of 1915, it was getting close to Barker's Island, but I have some farther to the right, a number is of course not an AKRF, but when you see it from the road or even the pictures that in the application, it almost looks like a ranch style with a little gable added to the front. But you can't see the rear, of course, and what might have been going on. But I saw nothing from the exterior that gave me the impression that it would be that old.
this is the garage in question.
You can, it's to the right of the property. If you look up the driveway, you
Right,
see it.
this is the proposed plan here, so. As you can see, the pool house is proposed. A pool is to be added. And there's a deck to be put on the house. So, the garage does not look old in terms of the construction
AYB's
presence.
1915, but I find that surprising.
And this is the house that will have a deck added on in the back. So I have no problem with the proposal myself. For the pool house and deck arrangements. The house, I forget what the house AYB on it was 1915,
15.
right? Yeah. So,
But it might have been more of either the caretakers type cottage. We've seen some in that area, or it was more of like, a summer, not necessarily hunting, but place just to come for the summer because it just doesn't look like
Yeah.
what would have been built then.
So I don't think there's any historical context of a neighborhood for this. The house has been changed anyway in many different ways in the past, as you can note. And the pool house and pool, are not an issue as I see it, so I have no objection to it. Any
You really
Bonnie
can't
have
see
other
the
feeling about it?
property from the road, so.
So, okay, without any other comments, I'll send in a report then. With no concern, okay. 172 Church Lane. Martha was out taking pictures recently.
I took some pictures, but I haven't been here enough this month to do the history. All I know is it was built in 1920 that I can tell. It's 2,000 square feet. So if you put it up,
I think you have to speak up a little bit with the microphone.
it was originally built in 1920. It's just, do you have a picture of the house? So the original bit is the bit on the left. The rest of it,
This
I think
portion.
it's 2012, wasn't it, applied for?
Most of you, because I have a picture of it when I drove by and the chairperson at the town have a picture, but there was not much left of the original section.
No, it's only the bit on the left where the flag is. It was originally built as 2,000 square feet and now it's 4,500 square feet. They want to get rid of, they want to add a bit, 63 square feet in the back, a closet basically. And then another little bit in the back on the other side is what the application's for, so nothing you'll see from the street. And it's a shame because that was the original house.
We can
There are a couple original
get
ones here, I
a-
think, maybe.
It's in the town, so it's in a historical area. We've had a few houses on this road come up. So it's
Yeah.
slowly getting altered, but I'd say,
So this is the location on, in a residential neighborhood that still has some historic
yeah,
houses of turn of the century and early 20th century. Also, let me just turn off this. Okay. And the pool was put in, I think, 2018 or so. Was also added. But if you go to, for those in the education mode, if you go to the permits section, you can find earlier pictures of the house. And in fact, find some very dramatic. This is the house in 2003. You see there are no windows on the front here, which is very odd, with just the small windows there. And then that's the original size of the house prior to a major expansion in 2012. We go to 2012 and we see here this is the front facade of the house again, the two windows being installed. Eventually this will be redone a little bit too. We can though get the better picture of what the house is about by seeing that taken in September of 2012 after the remodeling taking place. You can see two windows being put in here, French doors being put in there, and a great expansion to, which would be east. This would be the south facade we're looking at. as well. The distinctive feature is, you know, the cross gabled roof and the ornamental decoration, which was preserved. Just again, another perspective from the 2012, very kind of massive structure provided. If you look at the footprint of the house, you can see that it occupies a substantial, kind of maxes out the width you're allowed for the house and that particular part of the property. But all this is new to the rear and to the east. So it's been quite transformed, and, you know, in that sense doesn't have its original historic look to it. So
they're talking about, what they're talking about is quite minor in the scale of things and in the back. It's a laundry room, wasn't it? And
yeah, it's a laundry butler's pantry of, I think,
60
92
feet.
square feet or something along that line. It's very minor
Yeah.
type thing. So any problem with that?
No.
No, okay, none. So
We have someone on Zoom.
we do have, okay.
Want me to put him on?
Yes,
Yes,
indeed.
please.
Yeah, can you hear me? My name is Daniel Hargreaves. I'm the owner of the house.
Hello?
We can hear you. We can't quite see you, but that's okay too.
I'm actually traveling. I'm in Arizona. So the original cottage, which was actually built a lot earlier than 1912, we fully preserved when we did the renovation in 2012. So what we're adding to now is nothing to do with the original cottage, which has been fully preserved. It's actually the further back of the house where the extension was. So it's a minor addition to the laundry, which is at the back of the house, and then to a sort of an owner's closet, which is really now a landing for outdoor space. So it's at the back of the house. No one can see it. It's very minor, and it doesn't affect the original structure of the cottage, which we preserved.
So any comment
I have
on?
no problem. It's minor.
So first, any comment from board members? So, okay. If you want to say something.
Yeah, I'm Tom Watson from the Bridgehampton Civic Association.
Hello.
So hi. So it sounds like the owner was on the Zoom call?
He is on
Okay.
the Zoom
So
call.
I just want to say I live around the corner and I actually admire the house because it does, from the street, it doesn't look so big as, you know, when you look at it on the overview, you know, it's big to the back, but I think it's a very nice house. And also I like that the owner doesn't have all these hedges in front of it. You can view the house as you're walking around. As you can see, the landscaping is low. So I applaud the owner that, you know, it's not the typical Hamptons hedged, you know, where you don't see it. So I like those two, that aspect of it. So thank you to the owner if he can hear me. And I do have a question on the agenda. It said BHHD 119. What is that?
That's an identification from a historical survey of Town of Southampton historic resources.
Oh, okay.
That was done in 2014. And BHHD stands for Bridgehampton Historic District
Potential.
as proposed.
But it's not in the historic district.
It's not in the,
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
it's not in the 2023 designated historic district.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thanks for bringing it to the attention of us. So in the absence of any further comment, we will send back a report to the building department with no objection to the proposed addition, and thank you for providing comments tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. So 128 South Country Road, Remsenburg. Let us.
Okay, so this is a
Just one
construction.
question, Bill.
Sure.
Do you know the zip code for Remsenburg?
11960.
Okay. So what we got is, okay. Let's get a bright map here. The Google map is in the dark. Okay, thanks so much.
Mhm. Okay, so this is a construction application to create additions and alterations to an historic barn previously converted into a dwelling at 128 South Country Road. It was once on the same property as a recently landmarked dwelling that we approved and was landmarked at 126 South Country Road in Remsenburg. The 126 South Country Road is landmarked as the James Tuttle family home. The subject property, 128, is to the north of the landmark dwelling at 126 and includes a non-historic barn garage that has an incorrect AYB of 1850. Having looked into that garage, I can't imagine that any of the framing and the materials inside of it are any more than 40 years old. So that original 1850s barn may have at some point been replaced by the current barn. There's also a non-historic shed on the property, which has no AYB, and then there's the historic cottage, which has an AYB of 1800. It was formerly a barn located on the property to the south. The subject parcel was previously subdivided from that property, and the barn was moved and converted into a dwelling that retains a number of its historic aspects on the interior. The exterior, roofing, siding, trim, Anderson windows and doors, as you can see in the photos. It's all been upgraded at some point. Skylights, the brick chimney and fireplace, again, was added at a later date. The report that I submitted has the history that was originally prepared to document the history of the James Tuttle family home at 126 South Country Road. The Suffolk County tax map for the area shows that these properties, now subdivided, were once part of a much larger parcel that appeared to extend northward to at least Old Country Road. Collectively, this group of properties embodies much of the Tuttle family history in the hamlet of Remsenburg. The 1797 map shows that the South Country Road was present in the vicinity of the current road. Several dwellings were present in the area, but the properties and their owners were not specifically identified, so we couldn't really determine whether the house was there or the barn was there at that time. The 1838 Coastal Survey topography sheet includes Spionk, shows South Country Road present, and the original property appears to be developed with a dwelling owned by S. Rayner. The 1958 Chance map shows South Country Road present again, and there's a dwelling still owned by S. Rayner at the original property before it was subdivided. The 1873 map depicts several structures owned by the Tuttle family members on the north side of South Country Road in the vicinity of the subject property. It should be noted that the names Tuttle and Tut Hill appear to be somewhat interchangeable in the historic records in this area. The property was also noted to, at one point, be the post office for the local area. The 1902 map clearly developed and shows the current dwelling and 2 outbuildings owned by Mrs. C. Tuttle. The Academy Building, a landmark to the west of this property, was constructed in 1863. The Ocean House, a boarding house constructed shortly before 1878, is to the west of that building. The 1916 map shows the same property ownership as the 1902 map. The history of the historic map information indicates that the dwelling and at least some of the now moved and removed outbuildings at the original property were constructed before 1938 and were owned by S. Rayner in 1938 and in 1958, and J. Tuttle, or Tut Hill, in 1873, and Mrs. C. Tuttle in 1902 and 1916. The property was originally owned by the Rayner family and continued to be owned by the Tuttle family until 1973. The current property at 128 South Country Road is not listed in the historical profiles of esports beyond Remsenburg and West Hampton in 2004, and it was not listed in the Southampton Historic Resources Survey, the AKREF, in 2014. It does not appear in the local A History of Remsenburg book from 2003. The dwelling has the AYB of 1800. It was, of course, relocated and converted from the barn into the dwelling in 1978. The barn AYB of 1850 does not appear correct, and that barn is listed in the subject application as to be demolished. The shed beyond that is noted to remain as is. The wood deck on the residence and the 2 additions are to be removed. Much larger additions are to be added to the 2 sides. Although the original building will project out to the west of this larger construction, it's going to be changed in character drastically. They want to preserve the barn from the inside of the house. So they're going to build a shell, a 2x6 shell of studs and roof rafters outside of the existing frame so that they have an area to insulate the house inside and still leave all of the original framing exposed. So that's going to change the mass of it a little bit. All the doors and windows are to be changed. The skylights are to be removed. On the interior, that stairs, which was not original to the barn but is fairly old, will be removed. The loft that you can see to the right of that in that picture is to be removed. And to the left-hand side is another loft sort of bedroom, which was added later. The framing in that is all dimensional lumber. All of that's going to be removed so that this building will be just an open barn inside.
Kind of a rustic interior for, the rustic feel for an interior space.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, which is going to get a completely modern exterior.
Yeah.
The roof rafters are sort of strange. All the framing is sort of piece by piece. Some of it is logs with the bark on them. Some of them are peeled logs with an area that was flattened. Some of it is definitely hand hewn. You can see the adze marks in it. Other things are rough sawn. Some of it is modern dimensional lumber. So it's really hard to put dates on different parts of this. We don't really know the date that it was created. There you can see one of the rafters. It's rough sawn, but on top of the rafter is a very rustic living edge roofing lath. So again, how did the older lath end up on top of the newer roof rafters?
Repurposed wood stored
Yes.
someplace at
Yeah.
the time of construction.
Following this, I don't know if it's the next page. Yeah, I think it's the one after this.
It was moved like in
It's this one.
1978.
The shingles are all mismatched in that photo. It's like they just collected shingles and made a roof out of it. I've never seen such a disarray of
So
shingles in a single roof.
1978, if it was moved in, are you thinking that somebody just repurposed and, I mean, used the barn, but then found parts and,
Even the sort of earlier parts of the barn, there's mortises and tenons that
that's what you
that
mean.
have no mate to them. So it may be that they reconstructed it at some point from other parts, but definitely this collection of shingles just surprised me.
Well,
This would not speak to having a reputable builder doing the construction,
I'll say.
well,
Or
but,
reputable
but
owner.
more
Calling a
of
board.
a do-it-yourself farmer type.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've seen that done a few times with barns, where all the shingles seem to end up on the ground and the building was moved or modified, and then all the pile was sorted through and then re-nailed on so it would look period or rustic from the underside. They always look sort of snaggle-toothed
Mhm.
like that. So.
Yeah.
Well, as you may recall, when the property was subdivided, several of the buildings had to be either destroyed or moved.
Mhm.
And it may be that materials from buildings that were demolished at that time ended up getting incorporated into the barn as it was being
Yes.
converted to a house.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yes, by Tuttle's.
Mhm. Okay. So the proposed roofing for the house, the original barn converted to a house, and the additions is a combination of EPDM flat roofs, sloped architectural asphalt shingles, and although not called out in the drawings, there appear to be standing seam metal roofs on the proposed house. The siding is a combination of cedar shingles, vertical, looks like tongue and groove cedar siding, and stucco, all to be finished in a light gray color. The proposed doors and windows are to be Marvin in a dark gray noted as gunmetal. The historic portion of the house will receive an asphalt roof, and the siding on it will be the stucco in gray. So definitely between making it larger by building a frame around it, by adding the stucco to it, by taking the chimney, the brick chimney off and replacing it with a newer stucco-clad chimney, changing the doors and windows to Marvin in a gunmetal color. There will be no real way to tell where the original dwelling is and the additions start. Definitely the additions dwarf the original dwelling. The pictures here are the barn in the back, barn garage, and definitely the materials in there do not look like 1800s at all. The lofts are fairly new. They were added just recently, so definitely that's a much newer material. So the skylights will be removed. They will not be replaced, which is definitely a plus. A swimming pool is going to be added to the property. There was a hot tub in one of the pictures. Here you can see in the red boxes, that's what little you can see of the original dwelling. As you see to the left and right in the upper photo, the house is going to be a substantial home when it's completed. This portion, the original portion of it, is going to be dwarfed by that.
One thing to point out too is that this is at the end of a very long driveway. And there's the only street frontage is the actual width of the driveway. You cannot see this in any way, shape, or form from South Country Road.
Right. It's an extremely long driveway with a bit of an angle in it, so you cannot see up the driveway. Other than a few of the neighbors being able to see it, there is no public street right of way or anything where you can view the house.
Yeah, the Academy, which is landmarked, that property does adjoin a portion of this property, but even from the back of the Academy property, you cannot see this house.
This is the academy here.
That's the Academy there, and you can see the driveway goes down and then it bends, and you simply cannot see any of that
Mhm.
from the Academy.
There was another barn moved down that way, but you could see it from a road or right away.
Yeah, there are other
That's-
barns,
that's-
there are other barns in the neighborhood
Yeah.
that have been repurposed as homes, yes. But this one it's back there.
So it's definitely a
didn't look
very
like it.
modest home to begin with. It's gonna be a substantial home when it's completed. Looking at the earlier photographs, there is no historic fabric on the exterior. There were 2 additions done to it. They'll be removed and replaced by the larger additions. I was hoping that perhaps this portion of it would have had at least the cedar shingles on it, something to kind of give it the feeling that it was a little bit older. Doing it completely in the gray stucco siding with the asphalt roof, you're really not going to be able to tell it apart from any of the other portions of the house.
So do you have some questions that are significant about making a judgment on it?
I do appreciate the fact that they're keeping the barn on the interior, but definitely, I'd like to suggest that we recommend some sort of a change in materials, that this part of the house would be recognizable. But again, being that they're building 2x6 walls and a 2x6 roof structure on the outside of it, the mass will be completely changed, and the windows and doors that are in it now are probably not the original ones, or definitely not the original ones, and they're going to be replaced by some that are even different configurations. So I kind of have a feeling it's just going to be lost.
Yeah, the rub's trying to insulate it, you know.
Right, and keep it exposed on the inside. I mean, they could shingle it on the outside and insulate it and cover all the framing on the inside, but I'm not sure which is the
That
greater
seems to
loss.
be the only thing they think has any value is probably
Yes,
that
yes,
timber. So.
and the outside doesn't have any historic fabric on it whatsoever. So I'm kind of glad that it'll be left on the inside, but I'm not quite sure what to do on the outside.
So it doesn't meet any threshold for objecting to the proposal?
Not really, no.
Okay. Any other concerns or comments about it? Okay, so do you want to make the response and any appropriate
Yes.
tweaking recommendation?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Okay, 83 Halsey Lane Watermill, which Susan has been energetically pursuing.
We reviewed a proposal for construction for this property, for this structure in 2018. As I remember, there were a couple small rear additions on the older 1744 volume. There was an engineer's report submitted at that time in 2018, and it also appeared in this packet, even though it's not applicable to the project that's being proposed, but I didn't feel that it was necessary to request one, because this work is not going to be done on the older section. It's going to be done on the right newer volume, which is a 3-car garage that's going to become a larger 2-car garage. But that being said, I'd hope to get the site visit. I tried this week. A number of things, I guess, came up with the agent, and he wasn't able to get that scheduled. He sent more pictures today, but they are the same pictures, you're correct, David, that were already in the application. I was interested in the older section, getting to see the foundation and the basement and the cellar, because for my original research, that's the newer volume that's going to be demolished and rebuilt. But on the right, the older one, it has an AYB of 1744, but wasn't able to find it on the maps until 1902. And that whole parcel, Halsey Lane, it's of course a main drag going from the water mill past the windmill, down Halsey Lane, and then you would cross at the waiting place to Sagaponic. So it's there are a lot of historic resources in that area because of it being such an important road. But this particular property appeared to be owned by Theodore Halsey. He had a son, Augustus Bushnell, built down the street. His son built a house there also. He sold property to Lombard and Heirs, who built Red Gables, which later was transformed into Via Maria, and of course is extent there. So, because I mean, just seeing the interior, it's obviously been renovated a number of times, but I wanted to get the sense of being inside to see. I don't think those are replica beams, but the foundation, I found one in 2018. I could see some cement blocks in the basement, but to really get down there to see if that research was correct. Chances are it was moved from someplace in the area, because it mentioned Theodore Halsey. He lived at 61 Halsey Lane, and which was probably a boarding house. And at some point, there was an article saying that he rented a smaller house to a couple different families in different years. And my guess is he moved this house here and, rented it out. But on the left is where the older volume is. But the one thing now, which to me is a positive, it's been, from looking at the photos, I mean, you're not going to find any do not believe any original windows, any hardware, any doors. It's been renovated a number of times. But on the right, the addition, the garage doors are on the rear. And so you do not see them from Halsey Lane, and you don't realize that it's a garage and living space upstairs. But with the new proposal, the garage doors are facing Halsey Lane, and that particular design element, I have a concern about. I think it's like a small house with a really big garage to the right, and it's in a number of historic resources. I did that addendum separately, and also put the blacksmith shop formerly was almost across the street from this. So I'm gonna add the older picture and the newer one of that. But it's to demolish the newer section on the left, right there that Ed's pointing to. Don't really have a concern about that. It was built in the 60s, but then I don't think they got their CO to maybe 90, but that would be demolished. But the original older volume would be untouched. But once they build it, it's the design of it that I'm concerned about. So, part of me is like, well, no objection, design change, but I don't know if that would come through. To me, it's sort of really loud and clear, because I go down Halsey Lane a lot, a number of people do, that if there's any way, I was thinking keeping them at the rear, and Bill had suggested, which I hadn't really thought about it since it's going to a garage, possibly coming in from the side, and then you could put whatever fenestration in the front to make it appear that the whole piece is a residential piece versus a garage with spa and other type of rooms upstairs. But I'm not sure how. And the other thing I didn't realize, and this is a separate issue, that they did apply for those gates after the last review in 2018. I think in 2019 we didn't get that application. They were gates. And looking at those gates, we may have made recommendations, because now from the road, once those gates are closed and the screening, you really can't see either the older volume or the garage volume. But still, I think, because of the number of historic resources in the area, I think it should be considered, if those gates weren't there and if the screening wasn't there, well, what would be the view from that road? So, to me, it's design recommendations, but then I'm caught between to not object because it's the newer section, or to object because of the historical context of the rest of the street.
Well, to the extent that even the historic part is not visible, and the newer part is pretty much not going to be visible either, except when the gate is
Well,
open.
unless the next owners remove the gates, because, so to me, you're right. But I could see it in 2018 because those two pictures in the 2018 report, the semicircular driveway, I took one off of each side. And it did have a name, it was called Green Acres at one time. It's a Halsey house. It's listed in AKRF, but listed in the table at the rear, saying, don't know, looks like it's been changed. The AYB is, of course, 1744, needs further research.
Well, one thing is that there's been major changes to
Oh,
the
definitely.
structure and site, so
It's not landmarkable. I mean, I would not believe, recommend.
so it's lost its integrity.
Definitely.
Yeah, and to that extent, you're not preserving much remainder of the history.
Right. So I guess it's I think there was one, I'm not sure, down your way, that there was a large garage that you made recommendations to, because it was viewable from the street. It wasn't nearly as old as this, and I don't think it was actually in a potential historic district either, but they made recommendations to make it, to switch it so it would appear more residential than just having a large garage. And I think I will point out, at least from what I gather, if you go back to the aerial 2024, the property, and I won't go through the details, okay, you can pull back just a tad there, and if you can. Okay, the Via Maria's to the left, they had a subdivision there. There was a vacant lot right behind this. And I think it was noted in the sales that the price that was paid might have been higher than had been requested, because it was a purchase from somebody, an adjoining neighbor, I think is the way they phrased it. So from what I'm gathering is that long driveway going in goes to the new house. They purchased this, and this is more of an accessory building to the newer structure. And you can see the little walkway going to the pool and then this would be, it's not the pool house, but, guest house, accessory building. And I think that's wonderful that they were able to do that, but just somehow to preserve what the general public sees in the historic district, potential historic district. So then Ed's going with no objection in design recommendations. I mean,
Well, I have no,
no, I'm not saying, but
Yeah.
no objection. I mean, do that. And I don't disagree. It's not landmarkable. It's been altered a number of times. We're really fortunate, even though not sure where it came from and how it got there by 1902, that it's been preserved in some fashion.
well,
I don't think we should take
Is that,
I don't think we should take an opinion based on landscaping and gates,
yeah, well, that's,
because that would be everybody.
yeah,
So I think we're looking at the house, not.
looking at the house without the, that's the way I always thought that it needed to be interpreted, that without the landscaping and the gates.
so,
No
Two.
objection, design
okay,
change?
no objection. And are you going to, or if you do the report, would you provide or propose some design alteration to the
Right,
site plan?
I would, I mean, that's what I would,
And what
Bill
and what
gave me,
would that be?
Eddie,
And what would that be?
it would be, to access the garage from either the side or the rear, like right now, like they're doing. But any way that they could, make the front look, appear more residential.
Okay. Is there a comment on that?
Usually if you're coming in on the gable end, it tends to be narrower. And it sounds like they're trying to get, out of 3 bays, trying to get 2 large ones for some reason. And I don't know what they're putting in the garage, but there seems to be some reason they want wider, 2 wide spaces as opposed to 3 narrow ones. It would be cool if you could get the entrance on the end.
Or is it possible to just do a different design on these garage doors so they look less garage door-like? When the ones that exist now on the back look very garage door-like.
Those
and-
are garage, very
and
garage
not in
door-like.
keeping.
That is, you know, I had thought about that. It would, I mean, if they look barn door like, would that look like they have a barn attached to the house versus a garage? I don't know.
But-
I think it would be profitable to come in, and we fortunately don't have to see, never had to see those. So, there's a way to come in from the side, and that's what if not,
Yeah, there's not enough really room on the side. You could bring perhaps 2 cars in the side,
Right.
but you already have a bunch of infrastructure, as you can see in that photograph, that exists on that side.
Well, that whole wing is getting demolished and replaced with a larger wing.
Oh, the whole wing is
oh, it's all
demolished?
demolished, and, yeah, it's,
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
So my thought was 2 in from the end aren't as visible from the street, and the one on the front, if it's just storage, they could do more of a real barn door, or even, you can get an overhead door that has more of a barn feel to it or something.
but if they're enlarging it and they want the wider bays that coming in from the side, that
Yeah.
they may be able to.
The doors they're using are only 8-foot doors, and they're just a little more than a foot apart. So when you're looking at that elevation, it's like 26 feet of door. It just wasn't an attractive view from the street.
I mean, when I look at it in 2018, it was a mystery what the one on the right was, which was preferable to see the white doors on the other side.
And why
Whereas
were the
this one, I
garage
think-
doors on the back?
Yeah, so that one you didn't know, but then of course, once you research and you see the arrows, but this one, I'm just,
The driveway configuration suggests it may have once gone around to the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the survey.
Okay.
that's, old engineers.
Yeah, in that drawing, I mean, it almost looks like a 26-foot wide door,
Yeah.
not even 3 separate doors. And then there's no windows or a pedestrian door or anything like that. So it really gets a very commercial sort of
Yeah.
feel to it.
So we don't have really anything more to suggest other than, can you articulate then the design change for the,
So, I'll work maybe with Bill, I'll get something together and see what, I'll try to put some wording together, but I trust your your architectural wording and expertise more than I, so we could make a, recommendation on that.
Okay,
I know you're busy too with other things. I appreciate that. Thank you.
okay, all right.
Sort of dead ends, yeah.
So 35 North Bay Avenue, Eastport. Okay. Bill had sent out a report some time ago.
Okay, so this is a construction application to renovate and alter an existing two-story barn garage, which has an apartment with a CO in it, an apartment with a CO in the garage. The barn has an AYB of 1920. There was a garage addition or a garage built separately from it that was then connected to it at some point. So the barn seems to be 1920. The original certificate of occupancy for the house talks about a side garage, so I guess they meant that the garage was off to the side. So the garage appears to be 1935 like the house. The connector in between, not quite sure when that would have had appeared. The barn is in very poor condition and has suffered from severe water damage. In the photos, you'll notice that the interior finishes of the apartment have been removed. We reviewed this property in 2018 when an addition was added onto the north end of the house. The Landmarks Board had no objection to that addition, and the design of the addition complemented the existing house design. The subject property was identified on the town 2014 AKRF as EP33, but was not identified in the Eastport Hamlet Heritage Resource Area report. The AKRF referred to the house design as chateauesque, although it appears to be more French eclectic, and this property was listed in the AKRF as potentially landmark eligible under Town Criterion C. North Bay Avenue was opened in 1873, originally known as Waterville Road. There was no development at that time on the subject property. Detailed portions of the 1902 and 1916 historic maps did not extend far enough north to include the area of the subject property. However, based on information from other regional historic maps and the northern edge of development, it would appear that the properties to the south, detailed on the 1916 map, did not continue to the north to the subject property. In 2018, the applicant added a two-story addition to the house in the location of an existing one-story wing, which was not original to the dwelling. Town records for this property indicate the subject property dwelling was constructed in circa 1935, which appears correct based on the construction aspects of the building in the historic maps. The property has long been associated with the Rayner family in Eastport, and we can trace that to them from 1932 through 1970. This area was farmed, so it sort of makes sense that the barn might have been there in 1920 and the house didn't appear until 1935. I included the proposed elevations of the barn, although the character is somewhat modified in those drawings from what it currently is. It really suits the house much better. I can't say that there's any real definable design name or anything for the barn. So I kind of like the character of how they're changing it. The existing barn garage is definitely in need of extensive repair. The garage has recently been renovated to match the house. The barn is now going to be renovated in a similar way to match the garage that it's attached to and the house. So I had no objection to what they were doing.
Does look
Such an
like it needs a
interesting house.
lot of work.
It is. It's not the kind of house that you typically see on Long Island at all, really, but definitely it's a one of a kind in Eastport.
This is kind of a,
So there's a lot of artistic license in that
I
painting.
would say.
The addition that they did at the right end of the house does not really look like that, and the garage behind the house, further to the right there, definitely doesn't look like that. Doesn't even have a garage door in it, and that almost looks like it's 2 stories. So here you can see the barn in the left-hand section of the picture. It currently has a very large hole in the roof. There's a lot of water damage inside. The section to the right is the garage, which came later than the barn, and that is now looking as neat and tidy as the house. It's been given a new roof, new windows, new doors, new trim, new siding, painted blue, matches the house. Yeah, here's one of the interior walls. I think the sheetrock was really just falling apart. Yeah, a lot of water damage to the sheathing on the underside of the roof. Yep, damage to the floor. Odd sort of post detail. I guess definitely predates lapping the plates at the corner like we currently do with Western platform framing, though no mortise and tenons or anything like that.
So there's no objection to
Yes.
the renovations for the barn to make it into a habitable
Correct. Yep.
environment, so, okay. And would you do the response on that as well then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we did 91 Groves Lane, 55 Halsey Lane, Bridgehampton. Halsey seems to be in the news tonight.
A lot of them.
Okay. This house we've seen before, maybe 2017 or so. The original portion of the house was built in 1907 by a carpenter builder named Alan Halsey of Bridgehampton. Actually, he and his brother Frank Halsey. This happens to be Halsey Lane, but Halsey Lane was there long before these Halseys ever got there. They're probably 8 generations removed from the Halsey for which the lane was named. The original house here actually was much smaller, and it matched these 2 neighboring houses in terms of size and design. So they all apparently were built that period of time, 1907, 1910. But about 5 or 6 years ago, this owner applied to build an addition to the house I think it was 2000, maybe 16, he put in a pool house. This is the pool house here. And then 2017, he put in this addition on the house to greatly enhance it. At the time, the Landmarks Board filed an objection to increasing the mass of the house on the street because it was out of character of some of the other houses, which potentially would be in a historic district, residential historic district. So that was the opinion. The just to give a sense of what, we'll just look at some of the assessors' pictures here. I think have the this you can see is the house in 2003. It had a chimney on the front, which I think obviously was added at a time after its construction. And then 2016, still the house had its small size. And then in 2017, that's 2016, 2017, you can see this whole section was added to the house in some reasonable, compatible style, I would say. It was not totally out of character with it. However, it put a shed roof on here, and the proposal, one small aspect of this construction is to make a gable roof on this section right here to soften that shed roof look for the house. By the way, this is being undertaken by a different owner from the owners who did the 2017 addition here. And the other business of the house is related to what goes on in the rear. I will also point out that there had been a little bit of controversy with respect to the buying and selling of this house a couple of years ago, where it was determined that the fence line and driveway and building on this property next east of it actually encroached on to 55 Halsey Lane. So there was some accommodation at the time this house was sold. And to just get a sense of looking at the rear, which is one of the things that are basically going to be of importance here. Let's get rid of that. And this portion, enclosed porches, to be made into living space. There's to be more decking on the rear of the house. And also, I forget one other possibility on the application. Does anybody recall the details of the application? Let's see here.
basement's being added under that porch that's being converted to living space.
Just to, convert that sunroom on the rear to living space. That would be on the southeast corner of the, convert the back deck into a patio and expand the patio area. New swimming pool, and modify the roof line in the front of the house. That's that little gable design to replace the shed roof. A new basement entry, crawl space, and an outdoor kitchen. The house has lost much of its original character, increased mass, certainly changed in its outline and footprint. But it does sit, its context is it sits in a prospective historic district. I don't find any of the changes that are being proposed any problem for impacting a prospective historic district. The house itself has lost its original landmarkable character, I would say.
Is this one considered Bridgehampton Historic District 162, or I saw there was one, 55 Halsey Lane, but it was more in the text of another one. Maybe Hildreth, I don't know. Was it?
Well, it's on the corner of Hildreth Lane and Halsey Lane. I don't, this had some.
It doesn't make or break whatever you're talking about. I wasn't sure if, when I pulled that up, if it was the correct one or not. Could be, could be not. We'll check later.
So
It's been altered so many times would be the point after it was even put in there, along with another one that we had this evening.
So, my recommendation would be, no one has any concern not to object at this point to the proposed changes. So, Martha, you're okay. I can't see Martha; she's behind.
I know, it's a bad seat for us.
This has turned out to be an awkward redesign of the.
It's very messed around, this house in here. I mean, it's not good. Can do.
Well, we'll make do until.
Yes. Next time I'll sit further down.
Okay, so 55 Halsey Lane. 8 Justin Avenue, we've done. 6 Friar Lane, Noyak. It's a 1-story, has a log cabin style to it. My sense was that it had a AYB of 1940, and let me bring up the application.
I summarized as saying interior renovations replace roofing, siding, and windows. Thank you.
Okay, so we can. So this house also had is part of a subdivision developed in 1926. There's a lot of interior renovation going on. There are going to be replacement windows as well. I think it's been redone before. So we're not interested necessarily in the and there's going to be also removal of a door as well. So I didn't see this as a house with historic integrity. The neighborhood context, it's, you know, basically started out as a summer colony, and a lot of the houses in that area have been redone, and actually many have been replaced with bigger structures as well. So if there's no problem, I would say there's, you know, no objection from the Landmarks Board on this, and didn't have any kind of recommendations to go with it. So, okay. 16 Bay Drive, Hampton Bays. This is not far from Shinnecock Bay. It's a very faint image on a 1938 aerial. I couldn't confirm whether or not it was true. This house is positioned at an angular basis at the corner of was Pine, I believe, yeah, Pine Street and Bay Avenue here. I don't have any concerns. The application to put dormer on the southern side of the house, install a bathroom and walk-in closet on the second floor. It's a very small house. And get the architectural. Get the elevations. So this would be the front of the house. And you can see the dormer. That is proposed for second floor, facing the rear of the house. Just to get the picture of the house back here. So that's one way of getting added living space. So not uncommon for small cottages. So it looks like, I didn't look at the landscaping around, but
Looks really well taken care of.
pardon?
It looks well taken care of. And
Yes, it does, a well-kept neighborhood, generally speaking. So, any problem with the shed-style dormer expansion for this house? Okay. I'll take care of the response on that. Okay, so referral land. We can start first with 365, which Stephanie has collected comments on.
Yes. Took a look at this application. This is an application to basically construct a building on what is right now partially a vacant lot and partially a developed lot. The building will be used for recreation and meeting purposes. It's associated with the Eastward Bible Church, which is an identified historic resource. The proposed work will not involve the historic church building in any way, nor will it impact the adjoining historic cemetery or the adjoining historic school building on the west side of the property and across the street. What's proposed is basically to build a building on two of the lots, one of which formerly had a historic building on it. We reviewed the demolition application for that 2 years ago. We objected, but the building was demolished in 2023. The remaining dwelling on the property is about circa 1950, I believe, and does not appear to have any historic value. There's also a garage on that, or a shed on that property, and a shed/garage on the lot to the south, neither of which have any historic value. I didn't see any reason to object to the proposed demolition and redevelopment here. I don't see why we would have a demolition application referred to us for the remaining structures on the property, none of which are historic, and they're all post-date 1941. I did have some questions, some issues with the proposed building, I think which Bill has addressed in his comments. Bill is the architect for this project, and he has addressed the comments in subsequent emails. The building is going to be shingled with white painted cedar shakes, which is very similar to the church building. The windows are going to be divided light white framed windows, similar to the windows on the working portions of the church, if you will, as opposed to the decorative portions of the church. The one thing I noted was that the roof was proposed to be a standing seam metal roof, which is out of character with the church building, which has asphalt shingles. Bill has let us know that the church would consider the use of the asphalt shingles on this building as well, if we would prefer not to have the metal standing seam roof. There was also a depiction of the proposed new building showing it to have a flat roof on the center section of the lower portion, and it didn't agree with the south elevation that was shown. It turns out the south elevation showing a peaked roof on that lower portion is correct, and that flat roof that's shown there is not going to be how the building is constructed. So based on the additional information that Bill provided, I don't have any particular objection to this. I don't think the proposed building is going to have any impact on the nearby historic resources. So the task here is to simply respond to the planning board referral. And I was going to respond to that effect, unless anybody has any other observations about this particular site plan application.
No, well, just to make it clear that there are two buildings that are being demolished.
That's one of them.
That's one. And is this the other?
That is the other. That is correct. They're both AYB 1950, but I looked at the historic aerials, and it does look like these buildings were both built between 1947 and 1962. The 1962 aerial photo shows absolutely no trees or any other, significant vegetation around these two buildings, which suggests to me that perhaps the construction was closer to 1960 than 1950. But regardless, the design of the structures, the construction materials, that's asbestos shingles on the outside there. They say to me 1950, early 1960s.
55, 60.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not a historic resource. The associated garage building is not a historic resource. And then there's a small garage / shed on the adjoining vacant lot to the south. That one, which that one actually looked like it was probably built between 1984 and 2001 based on the historic aerial photos. So I see no potential impact from this project on the remaining historic resources.
These all have separate addresses, street
Yes.
addresses.
Right. The church building has an address on Main Street, which is Montauk Highway. That's 368 Montauk Highway. And then where this building is going to be constructed is 6 and 8 Tuttle Avenue, which is up the side. And then there will be a parking lot constructed and a gravel area that is currently used as a driveway and parking lot. So essentially that particular lot will have the same use, but it involves four separate properties.
So you express to the planning board a communication that
Yes.
We don't have concerns over any issues of historic character
Yep.
for the neighborhood or the church.
Yep, will do.
Okay.
And they are gonna landscape along Tuttle Avenue, which will partially screen anyway, the new building from the adjoining school to the west. They're also gonna put a vegetative screen up on the north side of the property between this new building and the adjoining residence. So there'll be more screening than there is at present.
And we have a couple of other referrals that were of concern that I emailed everyone about. And let me see if I can.
Is there any way to let the planning board know that it would be better to get these referrals so we have time to consider them before they have their public hearings?
Yes, there is. We can lodge some commentary to that effect in terms of there have been a number of issues over the years with respect to planning board referrals. One is that they take them, they don't pay any attention to the historic reference materials concerning properties that they're reviewing. That's a major problem for historic preservation, and we've all had the experience, not the newer members here, but we've all had the experience over the years of having demolition proposals come in for historic structures that have been previously approved by the planning board for redesigning lot lines, or ZBA to give approvals for different kinds of area variances so that the property can be intensively redeveloped in place of the historic structures that have been there. And it should be, I think, that we get first dibs at commentary on something that involves historic resources that goes to the planning board, that they should say, okay, you know, we get an application concerning a historic resource, get the commentary first from the landmarks board about the value of the property, the value of the structures with respect to historic character and significance for the town. And so I agree, but the package should be much larger in terms of trying to adjust the planning board's behavior with respect to referrals to us. And I will try to compose within the next 2 or 3 weeks a communication to that effect, and I'll pass it around for commentary for you before I send it off. So, does it sound okay? Okay, let's see. I sent out, there were 3 referrals from the planning board. One was with respect to 670 Montauk High, Queog, and involved this property, which is part of a much larger parcel that runs north from Montauk Highway to Old Country Road. And it's 20 some odd acres, but this is designed to subdivide out this laundry, laundromat, and car wash property under the same ownership as just one commercial parcel. This was identified in a historic hamlet survey, and it has a AYB of 1924 on the building, and certainly it's got a very interesting facade, masonry facade to display to the street, although the kind of an isolated section of the area as well. So if you go along, you can see that it kind of, it's not in the middle of any particular historic, series of historic or older structures. So I would say that, you know, there's no concern that we have with the proposed subdivision for this property, unless somebody has had some other reflection about it. Okay. So, all right, without, we can do away with that one. 1476 Spionk Road concerns a building of basically an industrial building on a property. If I should probably just give an overview of it. 1456. This is the house that is on the Spionk Riverhead Road. As you can see, sits in an industrial neighborhood, and it's proposed to make this former old farm section, parcel, into an industrial site as well. I did, because it had not been identified in any way, that I did a little historical background on this farmhouse. Assessor has it as AYB 1920. I know it comes a little bit earlier because it's identified with a family named Rajeski. And I did indicate the variety of spellings for the name Rajeski. I will say I didn't put in here one obituary from about 1950 in which the Rajeski relations were spelled in 4 different ways in the obituary. So, and it's a reflection of a common problem with Slavic names that have to be kind of anglicized for pronunciation and articulation as well. And certainly I can testify that with my name being changed the way it now exists. That was done 130 years ago. So, a farmer, immigrated 1901, was working in the grocery business in Jamaica and Queens in 1910. He owned his house in 1910. To me, that's quite a remarkable feat for a new immigrant to be owning a house. And then the next thing, he shows up in Spionk in 1915. His kids are in school in the Spionk school. And 1920, he owns his house in Spionk. And basically, or I should, on the Spionk suburbs, let's call it that, on the 1916 map, his name is found on the real estate map. The 1920 census has him owning his house on the country road, so he's off of the Spionk Riverhead Road, or as it was once also labeled in the census, Evergreen Avenue. He's a farmer for the rest of his life until he retires. He's still living in 1940 and a 1940 census as well. Did he build a house? I don't know. I could not find any kind of reference to whether or not he was involved with the construction of that house or it was there earlier. There was a greenhouse on that road down the road. There was another Swedish immigrant living in 1915 on the road. And I don't know exactly whether or not those 2 houses were there earlier. They're certainly not indicated in 1902 real estate mapping, but they are there in 1916. Anyway, the proposal is to demolish the house. This is one of those referrals we were just referring to, coming to us, with a demolition plan associated with it. So it's better that we can get our opinion in before it actually disappears. I don't see anything associated with the historical occupant of the house, and I don't see anything of distinctive merit in the house as it looks here today. So I think you can detect that the house probably has been redone over a period of time as well, given the character of the shed dormer on the front and the enclosed porch area in the front. So
this is one that, since it will involve a demolition of something older than 1941, I think it would be good to request that the demolition application be forwarded to us rather than just simply pass on the demolition.
to make a point of that.
To
Yes.
make a point of that, and also because of the history of, that I mentioned to you in the email, In World War II, there was a bombing range that was developed associated with Gabreski Airport, and a number of properties on Spionk Riverhead Road were seized by the government because they either were in or adjoined the bombing range area. And these Polish farmers who had, finally made it here in the United States were summarily tossed off their land and had to start over again. This is not something that I have ever seen reported in any, written documentation of the history of the area. But this was something that my mom had always told me about. And my father actually had records of these property transfers and who was tossed off, and I think what the amount was if they were paid. So it would be nice to just get a written report in the record of this, because I think this is maybe the last house on the Spionk Riverhead Road from that era. I agree, it doesn't have much in the way of historic value in and of itself, but I think the story behind it is interesting, and I think it should be in the record.
I was astonished when you reported that in your email to me, because certainly nothing that I've ever heard talked about occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have the records yet that your father had?
I have the records. When I was, going through my parents' things after they passed, they have records of a lot of things in the house. And I remember finding them. I've never seen them before, but I remember finding them, and I kept them. So they're in one storage cabinet upstairs that I have to dig out the appropriate box and pull out that information. I would imagine it'll be probably a little time before we actually get the demolition application, which should give me time to see if I
Well,
can.
it's just for the story alone, rather than tying it to the specific event here,
Mhm.
but to have some kind of acknowledgement of that with a little addendum to a heritage report or some other historical report that we can put on the website
Mhm.
as something of note, or an amendment to the local histories that have been done.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and it's a fascinating piece of information that you reported. Okay, 66 Lewis Road, East Park. And this is another farmhouse of small circumstances. And the prospect for this one is a subdivision of a 5-acre parcel. And because it was in the Hamlet Heritage Report and AKRF as a historic resource, it was sent to us. And it's up for planning board review October 24th, which is a little bit more than a week away. Let's see if, just to give the site here. Okay, so this is the house of concern. And this is the property it sits on. Stephanie, you had some comments about this?
Yeah, I did a report, say it was at least a year, if not 2 years ago, when we last reviewed this subdivision application.
This is the final application. You reviewed the pre-application
Okay.
previously. It's the same application.
I was gonna say, it looked remarkably similar. I didn't think we had any issues with the two of the lots, but I think one of the lots the existing dwelling is in a non-conforming location. And the existing dwelling does have some historic value. If I recall correctly, we, expected that dwelling would be retained. Did you, I think you circulated the prior planning board response to this.
Yeah, I was recommending that I think the other thing that you recommended in the initial response that was made was that it would be preferable to retain an open landscape for,
Yes.
that retain some of the character, original character of the area.
Right, because this was used for agricultural purposes, and a lot of the property still remains, open fields.
So, I think everybody got I sent Stephanie's original response around to everybody, did I?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, okay.
You
So
did. Do you want to just resend that response?
I would just
Update and resend?
yeah, a cover memo. We re-reviewed it as of this date, and our original comments are reaffirmed. Okay. So that's the agenda items we have here. 65 Old Riverhead Road is a likely landmark application we'll be dealing with at the next meeting.
Oh, Ed, one quick thing while we're on these planning board referrals. These 3 referrals we just discussed, I assume I should put them on the November agenda, since that's what they're slated for. Just as a matter of
that we
record.
took note. That's kind of recluttering the agenda. I think in terms of the minutes that we have,
That would cover it.
It could just be considered other matters on this agenda.
yeah. The question is whether somebody looks at the agenda and tries to do a search for the referral, but yeah, I don't think it's necessary to put them on the November agenda.
Yes,
Yeah.
we've already received a number of
Yeah,
things for November.
And it's opinion, it's not a determination, decision that we're making, so.
It's fine. All right. Go ahead.
520 Montauk Highway, Shinnecock Hills is still in the hills.
As far as I know, I haven't had much luck getting in touch with John Halsey.
And nothing, I've heard nothing on the Southampton windmill connection between CPF and the State University of New York and the State of New York on the property issue. And there's no news on 11 Walnut Avenue as far as I know. And 149 South Country Road remains a landmark recommendation subject to a possible easement offer agreement.
Right. Yeah, 149 and 11 Walnut Avenue, they're in the same boat.
Nothing new to take up on, with respect to the State and National Register of Historic Places at the moment. The other Stony Brook historic buildings that relates primarily, certainly, to the windmill. Certified local government activity. Vicky was undertaking the construction of an annual report that in theory is due November 15th to SHPO. And Susan, were you going to provide some?
All Susan did was read what Vicky wrote and look to see if there was any
Well,
extra
yeah.
things might be missing and send that.
Well, before, among other things, before it's done, we won't be meeting before November 15th. But there are things it asks about that I think I have some responsibility for
Yeah. Well, I
certifying to. So,
The only thing I saw was a list of the properties that we reviewed. Vicky sent that to me and said, could you look at this and see if I missed anything?
oh, okay.
That's, so I have to give her 100% credit for whatever's being
Right.
done.
Okay, well, I'll get in touch with her about
Okay.
running things
So
by me
that's the
before.
only information, and I looked at that and I said, well, I saw this or this, or that was not a landmark, that was a construction, or the way my notes say it.
Right.
Ed, one question came up, Bill and I were discussing on our way here tonight. We've both been taking webinars as part of continuing education training, but we didn't know is there a certain hourly requirement each year for each Landmark Board member to take continuing education training?
No, and there's a ambiguity in the way in which, quote, education takes place, because some takes place in the context of providing professional credits, and others are just, quote, general educational type things you can participate in, but a lot of them are increasingly being offered in ways in which you get a certificate of participation. So if you sign up for a webinar, one of the things that you might look for is whether or not you will get a certification that you attended, or in some cases it's even viewing prior webinars that exist. So there's no standard kind of number or hours that are out there. And certainly, you know, how many people go to sleep during a webinar in front of their computer, I don't know.
So we were both joking because we have to take continuing education credits for our professions, and there are quiz requirements, and you have to pass with a certain grade in order to get the credit.
Right.
I've been reporting, my participation in webinars to Nicole so she can track those, those hours.
Well, we take them on the planning board in West Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Those are required by the state. There's no requirement that the CLG members have to take any training, but it's encouraged by
It's
CLG.
expected,
Right.
yeah.
And is it something that gets reported in this report?
It should be reported in the report, yes, because they're working on trying to upgrade the whole state with respect to how boards and board members perform, and the more they get the reflection that people are trying to remain qualified, informed, educated, and skilled, that helps them promote that elsewhere where things are a little bit looser, although things are pretty loose here too. So, but in any case, there are plenty of, my experience is that there are plenty of places which have lesser standards of performance than we have. I did recently, last 10 days ago or something, I took a webinar on old cemeteries, so and preservation, and got a certificate from participating in it. I didn't see anybody else from Southampton town on the participant list. So. But thanks for bringing it up. It's a good point to be reminded of and to pay attention to.
If you have taken any of the classes, just email something to Nicole so she can kind of keep a running record of, and then we have it all ready for the report each year. That way Vicky doesn't have to go and ask everybody, so just, you know, whatever you've taken, just let Nicole know.
Okay, so, that report is underway. Anybody have anything of significance to otherwise bring to the board tonight?
Hey, can I ask a question?
Sure.
We all you had brought up something at the end of 2 meetings ago, whether we should, whether we're supposed to look at land as well as houses and for preservation. Was that ever discussed in any further way?
No, not since that original.
Can you put it on the agenda for us all to discuss at some point?
Yes, if you want it on next month's agenda.
If there's enough room, you all think it's worth discussing open space? Okay, yes, please.
And would you have prepared some thoughts in advance that you might, in written form, pass around to us before?
I could try.
Well, that certainly
I'll have
helps.
a go.
Helps focus.
Because we're allowed to, is that something that's under our remit?
Well, there are lots of, to me, there are lots of potential positives to an idea like that. And there's the possibility that code can change if there's a valuable idea that can be, you know, generated and supported to, you know, present as a possible code change. Whether it happens or not is another question, but that's part of our responsibility to take the lead in questions of preserving the historic character of the town of Southampton.
And I'm sure, I mean, there's a lot of bartering that goes on. There might be something more official than that. But, you know, if you give so much for agricultural and so much for back to the town they let you build, you sort of get around your planning that way. I don't mean that. I don't know if that's an off-topic conversation or there's something written down that says if you donate X, you
Well, we'll
talk about it.
tentatively have it as an agenda for item for discussion at our November meeting. And hopefully we'll have something from you that might frame some of the questions and issues that you think might be involved.
Thank you.
So, if you ask a question, or is there any other business for the Landmarks Board, somebody might suggest one. But in the absence of anything further, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Peter.
How much?